The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the Second Amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Second Amendment offered by Mr. Dix of Washington.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 5-minute vote.
Another amendment by Norm Dix of Washington and Jim Moran of Virginia. This would prohibit judicial review of any decision to delist wolves in Wyoming or the western Great Lakes under the Endangered Species Act. The underlying bill is the 2012 spending bill for the Interior Department. The Senate's been in today, and some debate over there on a debt reduction measure proposed by Harry Reid. The Senate has also approved the nomination of Gary Locke to be the next ambassador to China. He's the former Commerce Secretary, and he will replace John Huntsman as ambassador to China. Also today, the Senate passed on a 100-0 vote the approval of another 2-year term for FBI Director Robert Mueller.
On this vote, the yeas are 174, the nays are 250, and the amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is request for a recorded vote on the amendments in block offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. LaTourette, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendments en bloc offered by Mr. LaTourette of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 5-minute vote.
Steve LaTourette's amendment would increase by $50 million the EPA geographic programs for the Great Lakes Initiative. It would also reduce the EPA's science and technology by $20 million and the environmental programs by $30 million. Another 5-minute vote. 2 more amendment votes after this. We expect the House will move on to continued debate on the interior spending bill for fiscal year 2012. Here's where things stand in terms of the debt reduction legislation. On the House side, the Congressional Budget Office revising their look at the John Boehner proposal, saying that the federal deficit would drop by $917 billion over the next 10 years relative to a March 2011 baseline. According to that revision from the Congressional Budget Office, House GOP leaders modified that plan after an earlier CBO report yesterday showed it falling far short of the Republican deficit reduction goals. And it is likely that the House Rules Committee will meet tonight at 7:30, we understand. Rules is meeting at 7:30 this evening, and we will keep you posted. We are looking for live coverage on the C-SPAN networks, but we just got word that they're meeting this evening at 7:30, and that Boehner proposal will be on the House floor, we expect, on Thursday.
Yes vote, the yeas are 220 and the nays are 206, and the amendment is passed. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 39 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 39, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Pompeo of Kansas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered, and members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
Kansas Representative Mike Pompeo has an amendment which would cut an additional $6.2 million from the Environmental Programs Management within the EPA. The underlying legislation is the 2012 spending bill for the Interior Department. This is the 7th spending bill that the House has considered this so far this year, and they will resume debate on the bill following this series of votes. One more amendment vote following this. I want to let you know that we've just gotten word that the House Rules Committee will be meeting this evening at 7:30 Eastern or following the last votes, and we will keep you posted on any planned coverage on the C-SPAN networks. This is to consider the John Boehner debt reduction proposal, and that bill is likely to be on the House floor tomorrow.
On this vote, the yeas are 235, the nays are 191, and the amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 23 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Richardson, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 23, printed in the congressional record, offered by Ms. Richardson of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 5-minute vote.
The debate is on the 2012 spending bill for the Interior Department. This amendment by Laura Richardson of California would increase by $5 million from the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grants and decrease by $10 million from the Building and Facilities account from the Environmental Protection Agency. This is the last recorded vote in this series, and we expect the House to continue on with more amendment debate following this vote. I want to keep you posted on the Rules Committee meeting this evening to consider the John Boehner debt reduction proposal, and you may have heard that the Congressional Budget Office just a short while ago has issued a revised outlook on that revised plan of the Speaker's, saying that it would cut $917 billion over the next decade, which is more than he is proposing to lift the debt ceiling by, which is $900 billion. That compares to Majority Leader Harry Reid's plan, which would cut $2.2 trillion over the next 10 years, and a debt limit increase of $2.4 trillion past the 2012 elections. That Rules Committee meeting is happening this evening at 7:30. We will keep you posted on possible live coverage on the C-SPAN networks, and you can also look online at cspan.org to read both of those revised plans. We have just posted John Boehner's revised plan, the revised CBO outlook on that, as well as Harry Reid's plan as well. That is linked in our featured links section. There were a number of briefings today, a Tea Party rally, and more, and all of that is available at cspan.org.
Ayes are 193, the nays are 232, and the amendment is not adopted.
The House will come to order. Members, please take their conversations from the floor. The House will come to order. Ready? The clerk will read.
Page 66, line 11, Hazardous Substance Superfund, $1,224,295,000. Leaking Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund Program, $105,669,000. Island Oil Spill Programs.
Clerk will suspend. If members will please take their conversations from the floor. Clerk may continue.
$18,274,000. State and tribal assistance grants, $2,610,393,000.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Point of order. Members, please take their conversations from the floor. Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mrs. Blackburn of Tennessee. Page 68, line 11, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $30 million. Page 68, line 23, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $30 million. Page 158, line 25, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $30 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlewoman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to begin by commending our Appropriations Committee for the extraordinary job that they have done to claw back this money and to reduce spending below the levels that we had last year, or the levels in the CR. They have indeed done an exemplary job, but I think during these extraordinary and unprecedented times, we have to do more. And this diesel emission reduction program is one of those areas of funding that we can look at and say, indeed, this is duplicative. And because of that, we can eliminate this $30 million and move that funding into the spending reduction account. Now, DARA, the program under discussion, is a grant program administered by EPA. It seeks to reduce diesel emissions, that's a worthy goal, by providing funds for technologies to retrofit existing vehicles and infrastructure not subject to updated diesel air standards. Now, this is something that at one point in time, yes, it was important and had an impact on some of our communities. And they have done grants all across this country. Now, I want to point out that President Obama's fiscal year 2012 budget recommends completely eliminating funding for the DARA grants. And there is a reason that it has done that. One of the reasons that they have done that is because since 2007, new diesel engines have to comply with a much higher emission standard. Therefore, it is decreasing the need for retrofits. There's also other funding available for such retrofits through the Department of Transportation Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. They have about $45 million for diesel retrofits annually, and through the EPA's Supplemental Environmental Project Enforcement Agreement, where there's $7.1 million for that. There are other programs with similar grants. The EPA's Smart Growth Program, the EPA Performance Partnership Grants, the Clean Fuels Formula Grants. Indeed, the administration has not increased federal funding for this program above the $60 million level in place since the fiscal year 09, when it received an additional $300 million in the Stimulus Act. This is a program that we can say, indeed, has been a helpful program, but it is duplicative. It has outlived its usefulness because there are emission standards on diesel vehicles that have been in place since 2007. There is less need for these grants. Indeed, one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, as we were debating the CR, had recommended that we move, use this program, an offset with this program, and eliminate the funding for this program. Mr. Moran had offered at that point in time that we do that, and one of the reasons he gave was because the President had eliminated it in order to encourage the truck industry to increase its own diesel R&D. I agree with that. This is a program that we would save $30 million. I know that it is duplicative. We need to save every penny we can possibly save of the taxpayers' money. This is a step that we should take. I appreciate the support of the amendment, and with that I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. What purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition and ask to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition to the amendment that's brought forward to us today. If you look at the history, actually, of the DARA program, it's one of the rare programs in this House that has enjoyed bipartisan support from day one. When you consider the inception of the program and the continued amendments that have been passed on this floor, it has garnered support, and let's talk about why. There is evidence to show that for every $1 of investment that's made into this particular program, $13 is received back. $13 in economic benefits, in terms of jobs, and in terms of health savings. Why? DARA is the diesel emission program. I would say, is there anyone here who honestly believes that the American public who's driving on the highways every single day and sees the spewing of smog and soot coming out of trucks thinks that we no longer need this program? There are thousands and thousands of trucks on our highway, and if this program weren't needed, I would suggest, then why are we receiving thousands and thousands of applications every single day? When the trucks have been replaced and we have reduced the emissions, then there will be the time to reevaluate this program. But that time is not now. We are finally making progress, and let's talk about the benefits of the diesel emission program. Yes, one, it helps us to reduce the old trucks that are on the highways. But what does it also do? By having diesel emission, it allows us to also save in terms of fuel that's being used. And we all know our dependency currently on foreign oil. So when we consider the ability to be able to reduce the amount of oil that we have to purchase that individuals are purchasing, that truckers are purchasing. It reduces that cost of our dependence on oil. It reduces the cost of what the end users receive when they're getting the various products. Now let's talk about safety. When we look at the old trucks, if we can incentivize truckers to be able to upgrade their equipment, which would include filters, protection with diesel emissions, oftentimes there's other benefits they're gaining with those vehicles, and so we're also saving lives. I would say any suggestion of this amendment is short-sighted and ill-advised. This is a good working program, and the maker of the amendment agrees to that, and it garners bipartisan support. I would suggest to you, Mr. Chairman, and strongly urge that my colleagues would all join us in opposition to this amendment. Let's keep this program that is working in this country, and let's address the desperate diesel emission that's impacting asthma and many health issues in our country. I yield back the balance of my time.
Lady would yield.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
And I rise to oppose the gentlelady's amendment. I think it's instructive to point out I offered an amendment to strike funding for this program during H.R. 1 back in February so that we could add funds to the North American Wetlands Conservation Program. Now, my colleague from Tennessee, let me just check the record here, voted no. So I'm a little confused that now, and a few months later, 5 months later, she has changed her mind. It seems to me my amendment from February would have been preferable to the members who have anglers and hunters in their district, which I suspect the gentlelady from Tennessee does. They rely upon healthy wetlands, which have been very much endangered by what was an elimination of the North American Wetlands Conservation Program in this bill. This amendment simply throws away the needed funding, and I know the chairman of the subcommittee understands how needed that funding is. So it does seem to me that our amendment to have restored money for wetlands made more sense. Now, in the meantime, not only did I lose that vote, Ms. Blackburn was on the winning side not to eliminate that money, largely because of the compelling argument that was made by Ms. Richardson at the time. In the meantime, she has continued to lobby for this program. I found some of her arguments convincing, so we're not trying to take the money out that the chairman added. We can understand why it was added to the bill, so we would agree with the chairman, let's leave it in the bill, even though it had been zeroed out by the president. So I think Ms. Richardson not only won that vote back in February, kind of an embarrassing total, actually. She won it overwhelmingly. But I think she should win this vote as well. The money should be kept in the program. $30 million does seem to be doing some good things, and so I would oppose the gentlelady's amendment to eliminate the program and not even to use $30 million for any other constructive purpose. I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Idaho rise?
Mr. Chairman, to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment. When I first looked at the President's proposal to eliminate funding for the diesel emissions reductions grant, I knew that there was a budget gimmick that we would have to backfill when we did this budget. This was an issue I addressed with the EPA Administrator when she came before the subcommittee to justify her budget. The Diesel Emissions Reduction Program, or DERA, is a proven program with known quantifiable health benefits. The DERA program provides grants to states to retrofit old diesel engines in order to reduce pollution. These grants produce $13 of economic benefit per federal dollar, and the technology supported by DERA reduced black carbon emissions by 90%. Reduced black carbon emissions by 90%. When I asked the Administrator why she would propose to eliminate funding for a program with proven technology that works in order to fund new, nice-to-have voluntary initiatives that we have no idea what they do, she responded that it was a tough budget choice. Well, it was the wrong choice. I think the committee supports this program, has in the past. As I said, it's a proven program that has proven results, and that's why we backfilled the request, even though the President didn't request any funding for this, to put $30 million in. It is $20 million below what was funded at the current level. So it did have a reduction just like every other program, but we did keep it alive at $30 million, and I would yield to the gentlelady from Tennessee.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And indeed, we're all for clean air, we're all for clean water, we're all for a clean environment. I think that during these times, we have to look at how we're going to spend that money. And Mr. Moran is right. I did vote against his amendment because the money was going to wetlands and not into a spending reduction account. This is a program that is duplicative. There are other programs on the books. As we look at how to remove these redundancies and the duplications that are in the budget, this is an area where we can do it. We all want to make certain that we clean up the diesel emissions, but I would remind you all, since 2008, there have been a total of 500 grants that the EPA has given through this program. A total of 500. And we have 4 other programs that do this same work. This is an area where we can go and achieve a savings. It is $30 million, but these are the types of steps in the right direction that, Mr. Chairman, we have to be willing to take if we're going to get the federal spending under control. And I yield back to the gentleman.
I thank the gentlelady, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Tennessee. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Recorded vote, please, Mr.
Gentlewoman requests a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Tennessee will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Richardson of California. Page 68, line 11, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $5 million. Page 68, line 24, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $5 million. Page 76, line 22, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $5 million.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak on the Richardson Amendment number 2. This amendment would direct $5 million for clean air grants, which were cut by nearly 15% in the current legislation. Air pollution is a national problem. According to the EPA, approximately 127 million people live in counties that exceed at least one of the health-based national ambient air quality standards in 2008. New health-based standards for ozones will likely increase this number. Mr. Chairman, I represent a region that's home to the largest port complex in the nation and consists of some of the busiest freeways and railways in the country. However, there are areas also that suffer in poor air quality, which has led to much higher rates of asthma and cancer than the current national average. Exposure to dirty air causes tens of thousands of premature deaths each year and results in serious health problems such as the aggravation of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, difficulty breathing, increased susceptibility to respirator infections, adverse affections on learning, memory, IQ, and behavior, as well as cancer. Improvements in air quality lead to greater productivity, fewer sick days, and less money spent on health care to address air pollution-related problems. State and local air pollution control agencies have the primary responsibility to implement our nation's clean air programs that are required by the Clean Air Act. However, due to this current recession, state and local governments are increasingly strapped for resources and are finding it ever more difficult to carry the federal government's share of funding this responsibility. Because of the continuing adverse impacts of this recession on state and localities, air agencies will continue to make more painful decisions, such as reducing or cutting air programs that protect our public health. So in other words, we took 10 steps forward and now we're taking 20 back. Mr. Chairman, I've seen firsthand that clean air grants are effective. When you consider in an area of mine that's home to 16.8 million people and is one of the smoggiest areas in the nation, the South Coast Air Quality Management District is one of the air pollution control agencies for Orange County and Los Angeles urban areas, Riverside and San Bernardino counties as well. Clean air agencies also assist companies in being able to help them to comply with Clean Air Act regulations. This assistance has allowed many businesses to expand and to create jobs. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support clean air, support public health, and support American jobs. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Idaho rise?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, a good friend of mine from Virginia once said that he would hear this on the floor, and I guess this is probably the first time that he's going to hear it. That is, the gentlelady makes a good point. But given the allocation that we have and the low funding level, frankly, we just don't have the money to do what she's requesting. Her offset is to take $94 million, or to take money out of the capital improvements and maintenance program. That's a program that has already been cut by $94 million in this bill. We've had to make some tough decisions. And while we haven't eliminated the funding for this, obviously, but we just don't have that kind of money to put back into it. And every program is going to have to suffer some cuts. I don't think we should be taking money out of the capital improvements and maintenance program or allocation that has already been cut by nearly $100 million. So I would oppose the gentlelady's amendment and hope my colleagues would oppose it also.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Vote.
Recorded vote has been requested. Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California will be postponed. Who's up next? What purpose does the gentlewoman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't think I'd be down here this evening debating the Interior APA Appropriations Bill, in part because for the numbers of hours that we have spent in this chamber on this bill when we actually should be facing the nation's debt ceiling, giving the President a clean debt ceiling, and moving forward with rebuilding our economy and creating jobs. Instead, we're debating yet another flawed bill. It's the biggest assault on clean air, clean water, the endangered species, public lands that we've seen in our nation's history. The bill's unprecedented funding cuts and polluter riders to benefit rich and often reckless mining and oil companies will cripple the EPA's employees, health professionals, scientists, all of their ability to do their jobs protecting our nation and its public health. Rather than celebrating the advancements that we've made over the last 40 years in air and water quality, instead these Republican riders to ruin are driving us back to the 60s, a time when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring to awaken the American public to the man-made impacts on the environment. And I just want to take a few moments just to discuss a couple of them. There are so many that it's a tough challenge, these Republican riders to ruin. The bill would prohibit funding for the Endangered Species Act listings. Hundreds of animals have been protected under the Endangered Species Act. The bill would eliminate the protection that leads to the repopulation and revitalization of bald eagle populations in our nation. And for all the flag pens that we wear, we're about ready to decimate the very act that protects our nation's symbol, the bald eagle. Among other things, the bill also strikes out at ending regulations to expand the stormwater discharge program under the Clean Water Act. The program prevents harmful pollutants from being washed or dumped into our water systems. And as our cities and urbanized areas grow, stormwater runoff can become a threat if we're not able to better manage the discharge waters and possible impact of toxins and pollutants. And here we are, something I can hardly believe. I recall taking my son to the Grand Canyon and camping along the side of the South Rim many years ago. And what are we going to do now? We can pitch our tents next to the uranium mines at the Grand Canyon? This is insane. For the 5 million visitors a year who visit the Grand Canyon, we're going to jeopardize the water quality of our nation's most important rivers. I can't imagine families visiting the Grand Canyon. I can't imagine future generations pitching their tent next to the Grand Canyon, next to a uranium mine, because of this senseless legislation. It almost makes you breathless to wonder why it is that we've decided that the federal government doesn't have a role anymore in protecting our water and our land and our air and our air quality. The majority is pushing a bill on the floor that blocks the Clean Air Act regulation of fine particles and soot and delays the EPA from limiting toxic mercury pollution from power plants. I mean, why don't we just break up all our thermometers and dump them in the water? I'm not sure who these riders are meant to help, but I know that they don't help children in communities in my district and across the country who are vulnerable to air pollution. 30% of childhood asthma is due to environmental exposures, costing the nation $2 billion per year. These riders add to the arsenal. They just add to the arsenal. Low-income and minority children experiencing more doctor visits and hospitalization due to asthma than the general population and 3 times the rate of white Americans. This is a really sad day, but it's most especially sad because we should be doing the nation's business. Today, we watched the stock markets plummet because of the uncertainty that we've created in this body because of the incalcitrance of the Republican majority. And so I know that we have to do this horrible interior EPA appropriations bill, but what we need to do is fix this nation's economy, get people back to work, building our roads and our bridges and our infrastructure, protecting our national parks, and instead we're engaged in the silliness of trying to play dice and chicken with the American economy. It's a really sad day for the American public, just a really sad day. And with that, I yield.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purposes, the gentlewoman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. The majority has been saying how concerned they are about future generations, that we shouldn't be overburdening them with our debt. I wholeheartedly agree. That's why, Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed that instead of addressing the urgent debt crisis, we are on the floor debating a bill that will gut pollution controls and public health protections in order to boost profits, the profits of America's biggest polluters, the last people who probably need a hand right now. This bill does a number of things, Mr. Speaker. It blocks even modest pollution control standards that could mitigate climate change. The bill also erases 40 years of federal laws that protect clean air, water, lands, and wildlife, and it cripples the budgets of the federal agencies we've charged with protecting our constituents. As a mother and grandmother, I'm appalled that this bill signals a willingness to leave our families a more unhealthy environment than we have today. Isn't the idea always to leave things better than we found them? But instead of protecting our citizens and shorelines, this bill exempts oil companies from complying with Clean Air Act for offshore drilling. Instead of protecting our drinking water and waterways, it cuts nearly $1 billion in funding for the Clean Water State Revolving Funds and will, if enacted, compromise the ability to address urban stormwater runoff, one of San Diego's greatest environmental threats. And instead of supporting a cleaner, more efficient auto industry, it blocks an improved fuel efficiency standard, jeopardizing a process projected to create up to 700,000 new green jobs, to cut fuel costs and save 2.4 million barrels of oil every day by 2030. It's alarming It's alarming, Mr. Speaker, that my colleagues who speak so passionately about giving the next generations a clean financial slate would so carelessly leave them a dirty planet. I suspect that the grandchildren of some oil company executives can't always jet off to pristine resorts, but quite frankly, that's not the situation for most of my constituents. The grandchildren of 85% of Americans just told the Washington Post ABC News poll that they are, quote, just getting by or falling behind, and they'll be stuck paying high gas prices and worrying about their jobs and worrying about their health. We should be leaving our children and our grandchildren a chance at the American dream of middle-class prosperity and a legacy of environmental responsibility and stewardship, not one of reckless disregard. I strongly urge my colleagues to join me in opposing this bill and getting back to bridging the divide so our constituents, that debt divide, so our constituents can focus on their own jobs rather than being concerned about whether we're doing ours.
Gentlewoman yields back. What purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
Last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, in some respects, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. Can anyone explain to me why, when we are 144 hours from crossing the brink, from going over the ledge, to have this country come to a screeching halt financially, tell me why we are debating the appropriations bill for the Department of Interior? Why aren't we dealing with what the American people want us to be dealing with right now, and that is the debt limit, raising the ceiling on the debt limit? But no, we're going to spend hundreds of hours here over the next couple of days talking about the Interior Appropriations Bill. Let me tell you what I'm hearing from my constituents, and maybe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle aren't getting phone calls from their constituents, but I am, and let me tell you what I'm hearing. One woman wrote me and said, my mom is 79 years old, worked all her life in a factory, and retired. Her pension was handed to her on her very last day of work, $25,000. The plant closed, moved the work to Mexico, and her husband died 8 years later. That $25,000 didn't last long. Now her only source of income is Social Security. She lives in a senior retirement center that she loves. Last Thursday, she and my aunt, who is 83 and also widowed, called me to pick them up and take them to the bank. They were going to withdraw from their savings money to pay their rent, as they, along with all of the other seniors they live with in that retirement center, are convinced they will not get their Social Security checks come August 1st. My mom has a doctor's appointment on August 5th, and she wonders if the doctor will continue to see her if the government doesn't pay for Medicare. I care deeply about them. I know for a fact that my mom is losing sleep over this. Last week, I thought she was foolish. This week, I'm beginning to think that I'm the fool. How do you look your mom and your aunt in the eye and say with great certainty that the U.S. government will send them their Social Security? That was just one letter I received, and I've gotten lots of phone calls. A 52-year-old woman who's self-employed as a court reporter paid $13,000 into the Social Security system last year, and she's calling me saying, what are you all doing? Interest rate on my mortgage is going to go up. Interest rates on my credit card are going to go up. Why aren't you fixing this problem? No, we're standing here talking about the Interior Appropriation budget. A woman from Daly City, 68 years old, previously suffered a stroke, has had seizures and relies on Medicare to treat her rheumatoid arthritis. Her husband, a cab driver, will turn 70 in December, at which point he will go on Social Security and hopefully go from working 5 to 6 hours a day to maybe 4 hours. If he loses his Social Security, he will probably have to work longer hours again. They're all anguished. They all want us to do our job. They want us to lift this debt ceiling, protect Social Security and Medicare, and fix our attitude that we have here that somehow it's okay to just stall. It's okay to just try and make points, make political points, while they're all wringing their hands, while they're taking money out of their savings accounts because they can't pay their rent if they don't get their Social Security check come August 1st. Well, for my colleagues who maybe haven't heard from their constituents, I want the American people to call this telephone number. Call this telephone number and call your member of Congress and tell them what you think we should be doing. Should we be debating the Interior appropriation bill right now, or should we be fixing this debt limit? A debt limit, I might add, by virtually every economist of every political stripe has said, you have to lift it. President Ronald Reagan said, it has to be lifted. Why should Congress always take us to the brink before they act? It's time for us to be responsible, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back.